Telekonferensi dengan Perdana. Telekonferensi.
Panggitan empuk tu bagi saya.
Datuk Seri, we have now turned it on. I'm just waiting for a couple of minutes because people are now logging in. So I'll just take maybe 2 or 3 minutes and we'll start. We are already online. We are already alive.
That's fine. Okay.
So I guess we can start now. We are seeing people are joining. About more than 300 people have already joined this webinar. More will join in a few minutes.
Okay.
So I'm going to start. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and good afternoon. And Ramadan Mubarak to all of those who are celebrating, including Datuk Seri. My name is Ali Salman and I'm CEO of Ideas, and I will be moderating this exclusive webinar today, post-COVID-19 economic recovery plan, and with special discussion on role of Economic Action Council with Datuk Seri Mustapa Mohamed. I will formally introduce Datuk Seri now. Datuk Seri Mustapa Mohamed is currently the Minister in the Prime Minister Department in charge of the economy. He's the Member of Parliament for Delhi and was first elected in 1995. His first stint in the cabinet was as Minister of and as the Asian financial crisis hit Malaysia, Datuk Seri was later appointed as the second finance minister in 1998, making him the first Malaysian to hold 2 ministerial portfolios at the same time. He has also served as the Minister for Higher Education, Minister for Agriculture and Agro-Based Industry, and Minister for International Trade and Industry. Datuk Seri Mustapa holds a first-class honours degree in economics from University of Melbourne and a master's in economic development from Boston University. And that is the only thing which Datuk Seri and I have common, that having studied economics from Boston University.
Indeed.
Datuk Seri, thank you so much for joining us in this exclusive webinar. Happy Ramadan to you. And this is all we understand. We are living through very unprecedented crisis. We have never faced such moments before. Very difficult choice by the governments all over the world, and including Malaysian government, when it has to choose between lives and livelihood. And certainly one of the most difficult, challenging moments for you as a policymaker, I'm sure. At the outset, I would like to congratulate you and the Malaysian government for very actively managing the crisis so far. And we are all, of course, waiting that sooner or later, these restrictions will be lifted and we can go back to the normal economic activity. Datuk Seri, I'm sure as a member of parliament and as a minister in this government, you would already be aware of many issues and feedback which people from various walks of life, including business, industry, are bringing to you in terms of how they are coping with their crisis. And we also acknowledge that the government has already announced series of stimulus packages to help the economy, to help the enterprises, SMEs, which is indeed a welcome step. In today's webinar, we will discuss some of these measures, and I will have some questions. So the arrangement would be that we have about 1 hour, and in the first maybe half hour or 40 minutes, I will have some questions for you. And then later on, we will be attending to at least some of the questions which the audience is posing on our chat. So I think let me just begin by requesting you to elaborate in general the role of Economic Action Council, which has been set up under the new government, in general its role and particularly focusing on mitigating this crisis. Over to you, Datuk Seri.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon to our Muslim brothers and sisters. Selamat berpuasa, to all of you, and thank you for arranging this seminar, webinar, or video conferencing. I'm more comfortable with video conferencing. Firstly, the Economic Action Council was set up on the 11th of March this year, a few days after the new government was set up, a few days after Datuk Seri Mustapa became Prime Minister. The main objective of this council is to be a platform to get feedback and decide on, well, of course, to monitor economic and other developments in the country on a regular basis. And the Prime Minister chairs all these meetings, and the meetings are held once a week, every Monday. And we have Secretariat, it's a joint secretariat between the Ministry of Finance and the Economic Planning Unit. We have an Executive Director, Professor Tan Sri Azlan, the former Vice Chancellor of UKM, is running this Secretariat. And a lot of groups have been formed. The main purpose is to act as a listening board. And I just want to share with you that the Prime Minister is very focused on COVID. Health, of course, number one. Economic matters are equally important. He's got a good team, led by him, of course. And we have an economic cluster. As you know, there are 4 senior ministers. One cluster is the economic cluster headed by Datuk Seri Azmin. The meeting minister is senior minister heading the economic cluster. And under him, among others, he's got the Minister of Finance, doing a lot of work in terms of recovery plan. And I'm part of the team. And Tan Sri Mustapa has announced 2 packages thus far. The first one was announced on the 27th of March, and the second one was announced on the 6th of April. So there's 2 stimulus packages in dealing with the crisis, introduced by the previous government on the 7th of February. So there's been 3 packages so far. So the main purpose, once again, is to be hands-on, to understand what's going on in Malaysia and indeed the world, and to respond very quickly. The whole idea is to respond very quickly to these developments and come up with comprehensive strategies. So far, we've been getting very good feedback. The Prime Minister has done well, and received both in the form of surveys and anecdotal evidence indicates that, especially the B40 and micro enterprises, they are pleased with the help given by the Ministry of Finance and the Government of Malaysia. And we have been working very closely, all of us, focusing on this COVID crisis. Of course, the frontliners are mainly people in the Ministry of Health, the Health Minister, the Director General of Health, and the whole Minister of Health are working very hard to contain this pandemic. And we also have, besides the health frontliners, we are beginning to have economic frontliners as well. These are people who are some of them are beginning to work. This is equally important. The fact is, there will come a moment when we need to have a good look at what's happening. As I say, health has been a number one issue. We've been very successful in containing this pandemic, and whatever opening we have decided in the last few weeks, of course, these are all contingent to very strict protocols imposed by the Ministry of Health. Yeah? So this is what we've been doing in the last few weeks. 11th of March, this is 24th of April. So we've been around for only about 5-6 weeks, the Economic Council. Yes, Adi, over to you. I can't hear you. We're having a problem. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Datuk Seri, for providing an overview of the framework of National Economic Planning and Economic Action Council. I think this is very comforting to know that how government has been continuously monitoring the feedback received from the various stakeholders in terms of its policies. And I'm sure this is feeding directly into the policy making also. As you already have mentioned that it is important, like you use the word economic frontliners, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll pick up from that word. I like the term economic frontliners. So have the government thought about like any priority sectors? Of course, we have received the news and we have been hearing various policy announcements, but it will be helpful for us and our audience to listen from you that what are the priority sectors which the government has planned?
Well, this has been done by the senior minister, MITI minister, in two phases. The first phase has got to do with what we call essential services, 10 altogether. Food, of course, is very important. Pharmaceutical, medicines, this is another important sector. And some other services like utilities. And in the first batch of opening up, included in that was electrical electronics, for example, which are some of them are part of the value chain. So that was the first part. The second opening was about a week ago. And this covers about 8 sectors altogether, including construction, and further opening aerospace, for example, has been given the go-ahead. But all these have been approved subject to very strict protocols imposed by the Ministry of Health. That's very important. So the number one priority for the government is to ensure that people are safe, in terms of health, spread of the pandemic is contained. And if there is any transgression of those rules and procedures, the ministry will act very decisively in withdrawing the approval. So we've done this in stages, and this has been done in consultation, especially with the Ministry of Health, with the observation of very strict protocols.
So do you see that these guidelines and these protocols are going to be taken seriously in terms of implementation? And what will be the sort of course of action? Let's say if there's a report from one industry or cluster that these protocols are not being observed, and so is the government has thought about like penalties or any actions which it can take to control these?
Well, by and large, Malaysians have been very disciplined, very well behaved. There's not been too many naughty ones. Police have erected roadblocks throughout the country. There's been some transgressions, and they have been compounded. Some have been brought to court. So that's the health side. This is the MCO part, the movement control order, which is mandatory for many people. So in general, Malaysians have behaved themselves. There's been some people who've been flouting the laws, regulations, but overall I think is okay. Yeah, and the same is true with companies which have been given approval by MITI. I've been told that there's been a very small number of companies which have not towed the line, and action has been taken by MITI. The bottom line is that this is working well. In general, companies have been following the rules, regulations set, or SOP set by the Ministry of Health, and MITI has been on the ground with the help of other agencies to ensure that these conditions are adhered to. The fact that we do not have too many problems, I think, indicate that this is working quite well.
Great. Let me just now turn the topic to a related topic, issue of like geographic clusters. So you have mentioned about economic clusters. You have mentioned about which industries are being given priority and under the protocol. But according to some observations, some states like Penang, Perlis, Kelantan have not been observing any new cases. So is there any thinking in the government to sort of allow fuller economic activity in such states or in such geographical clusters? Has there any been thinking like that currently?
Firstly, when it comes to clusters, the red zones, green zones, these decisions are made by the Ministry of Health. Yeah, I'm not an expert in health matters, and neither do I have local standard to comment on those issues. But in general, I mean, some of these things are in the public domain. Perlis, for example, is a green state, and there's not been a single case in the last few days. So there is some thinking in government that we should look into the possibility of relaxing some movement in the green areas, green districts or green localities. Now the health authorities are zeroing in not only at district level but also localities within a district. So this is within the purview of the health ministry. But going forward, because MCO is being extended by another 2 weeks, as announced by the Prime Minister last night in a special address, I think it makes sense for the authorities to consider what else can be opened up. And it is a continuous process, but whatever the government does is subject to the protocols, as I said, by the Ministry of Health. I think the priority remains health. We do not want to make sure, we want to make sure that the pandemic is well under control. And so far, I must say, at a personal level, and I suppose my colleagues as well in the government are quite happy with compliance. But there's been a few, not too many, cases of companies which have not observed those protocols. But in the context of the overall approval number of companies approved, I think it is a number that's small. So
that's encouraging to hear. Let me ask you another question, which is you mentioned about the stimulus packages in the beginning, and you mentioned that including the previous government, we have now heard 3 stimulus packages. And can you elaborate the role being given or played by the GLCs in this particular scenario, especially with regard to stimulus package, and where do you see their role going on in the economic recovery plan in the future?
The 3 stimulus packages, namely 27th February, 27th March, and 6th April, these have been mainly driven by the Ministry of Finance. It's got to do with allocations from the government. It's got to do with the banking system, central bank. Also, some GLCs have been required to play a role. What's important is that we're coming together, the public and private sector. I think this is a time where we've noticed, I mean, it's a new normal, of course, changes in consumer behavior, but at the same time, Malaysians are getting closer to each other. Yeah, we're more united. The government is very united. We speak with one voice in the cabinet. We focus on addressing health and economic challenges during this COVID era, MCO period. So this is something that we're proud of, that people are working together. The public sector, of course, is working very hard, so finance and others, MITI and others. And the private sector is coming forward. They've come forward to provide donations to hospitals and other NGOs, food, of course, as well. The religious authorities in every state have come forward. State governments have also been quite forthcoming. The biggest, of course, comes from the government, 260 billion, and that 260 billion of injection of the value of stimulus packages, three altogether, has got three major components. One, of course, is federal government. Number two, a few GLCs, and number three, the banking system. Yeah. So your question on GLCs, I think we're pleased that they've come forward. Some of them have contributed to the COVID fund. Some of them have their own programs in providing ventilators to hospitals. And of course, in the case of EPF and SOCSO, they've shouldered a bigger responsibility compared to other GLCs. So once again, we are united. Yeah, the public and private sectors, we're working closely with each other. Everyone has come forward. Some individuals, religious zakat, from throughout the country, state governments have been quite forthcoming. So we put all these things together. The reason why we are able to weather the storm is because the federal government is very, very much focused on the COVID issue. The health authorities, Ministry of Finance, and other agencies in government. GLC is also supporting us, the private sector as well. As a matter of fact, individuals are also chipping in to alleviate the burden, especially of B40 and also micro enterprises.
Yep, I have no doubt. I think this is, as you have explained, that this crisis is a moment where all Malaysians come together and contribute
closer to each other.
As together in recovery, and hopefully that will be very effective in the times to come. But within your own domain and in the economic affairs, if I could indulge you further on this year 12th five-year plan has been planned, will be announced. But as we know that the COVID-19 crisis all around the world, and Malaysia is no exception, has changed fundamentals, has changed many assumptions. And in fact, let me also add that not only COVID-19, but before that, we had been seeing oil crisis. And again, we have recently observed unprecedented low levels, actually negative territory, which we never observed in the oil commodity. And we know that Malaysia has been dependent on the oil revenue. So COVID-19, oil crisis, and the 12th five-year plan, if you can share any thoughts on that, how it's going to affect and how government is rethinking through it.
Firstly, not many people expected the pandemic to last this long when it first started, of course. And in respect of MCO, when it first started in Malaysia about 5 weeks ago, we thought it was going to last for only 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now it's going to the 5th, 6th week, and now for the extension. So this is totally unexpected, the duration. And we did not, in the beginning, fully understand the full impact. Tourism, for example, has been the worst hit. A few hotels have been closed completely, and those hotels which remain open has got very, very low occupancy rates, of 5%, 10%, which is never in Malaysian history. Of course, we never encountered roadblocks, for so long.
Right.
We're closer to family, which is a good thing. But some people are getting quite restless staying at home for so long. So this is unprecedented, and it's got a big impact on businesses, micro enterprises, SME Corp, and Stats Department. They have done surveys. The various organizations, FMM, Chinese Chamber, and others, they've shared with us some of the findings of the surveys, and all those indicate that micro enterprises and others have been badly hit. People in retail, have been telling us that the business has been badly affected because there's got to do with tourism as well. So the extent, in the beginning, of course, as you know, IMF has got, a forecast world economy, which looks all right, but now I think many people are saying that it's going to be a lot worse than earlier predicted. So overall, the magnitude of this crisis nobody really anticipated. So for us in Malaysia and indeed the world, you mentioned in our case oil and also the 12th Malaysia plan. Oil, of course, has been a very important commodity for Malaysia in the last 30 years. Oil has contributed a lot to Malaysia's development. Indeed, quite a bit of development in Malaysia has got to do with oil. KLCC, and Putrajaya, for that matter, been financed by Putrajaya Holdings, which is, of course, got to do with Petronas. So oil has played a very important role in the Malaysian economy. They provided scholarship, set up university. History of oil in Malaysia, is a very good story to tell in the last 30 years. They've changed the lives of every Malaysian. And for the government, we've been getting quite a bit in the form of petroleum income taxes, other duties and dividends, and other duties we collect from the petroleum sector. Some years it has gone as much as 40% of the total government revenue. Sometimes now around 20. So 20 is quite a large percentage. Oil has got a big impact on our economy. Of course, it's got a bigger impact on economies in the Middle East, for example, countries which are more dependent than us. Our oil production is small, but because Petronas is huge as a global, it's a Fortune 500 company, the only company that we have in the Fortune 500, Petronas, and Petronas is overseas as well. So the impact on the government revenue, on export earnings as well, and there are lots of companies involved in the petroleum sector, oil and gas companies. Some have done well, not only Malaysia, our own companies have done well, not only here, but overseas. So there's a lot of spillover and knock-on effects on many sectors of the Malaysian economy, government revenue, oil and gas companies, dividends. So, of course, this will have an impact on our revenue. And when it comes to the 12 Malaysia plan, when I came into this place about 5-6 years ago, a lot of work has been done. Yeah, my predecessor, Senior Minister Datuk Azmin, has completed almost all the work when it comes to the preparation of 12 Malaysia plan. When I came in the first few days, of course, everything was okay. But in the last month or so, things have deteriorated on the oil front. Yeah? WTI forward was negative for a few days. Yeah. And Brent is still very low, around 2015. Yeah. So planning was done in a period when the economy was doing okay. Last year we did well. Previous year, 2018, we did quite well. And the forecast for economic growth for Malaysia this year and the years beyond have been quite favorable. But when COVID came, and now we are dealing with a very difficult situation. Negative growth. When growth is negative, there will be less tax collection, less dividends from Petronas, and all other many other implications. Export earnings as well have been adversely affected. Therefore, we have to realign. Although a lot of work is almost done. When I came here 5-6 years ago, RM12 was almost in place. But with the current situation, revenues have been affected. But more importantly, revenue is important, of course, but the other equally important issue is that this new normal, it's going to take a while before companies are revived. Yeah, SMEs can be back on their normal footing once again. People are probably holding back investment decisions. So we have to revisit some of the assumptions made in the last few months when preparing the 12 Malaysia plan. So in summary, oil, of course, has got a big impact on the world economy. Yeah, not only in Malaysia, but especially in the major oil producing countries. And when it comes to planning, some of the numbers which we crunched earlier are no longer relevant. And now we've gone back to the drawing board in terms of forecast of economic growth, in terms of allocations, of course, will be affected, and various other implications on the country's economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Datuk Seri, for a very elaborate answer. A couple of follow-ups on that. There have been suggestions, and this I'm talking in the discussion is happening in the US, that because of this crisis, this may be the time where governments, wherever they are holding assets, can consider selling of those assets rather than creating an inflationary pressure which may be the result of like stimulus packages. If you keep on writing opening the checkbook, of course, the businesses will keep on demanding. So an alternative can be, it has been suggested that governments can actually, sell off the assets and use that cash and use the assets for economic recovery to helping out businesses. Has this been considered in this crisis, or is it not in the options?
Well, government owns some land. Government owns some shares in some companies. If we were to dispose of this asset, it would be fire sale. Yeah? I'm not too sure whether that's a good thing to do. I mean, there are two views to this. One is to hang on to those assets because there will come a time when those assets will be more valuable. The other view is that we need the money now. Why don't we liquidate all the assets? At the moment, this is not one of the alternatives considered yet. Of course, it's 260 billion ringgit coming from the 3 stimulus packages. Some came from direct fiscal injection by the government. Some came from EPF and SOCSO. And the bulk of that, of course, is coming from the banking system. So that's where we are now. Asset sales, I think, in my personal view, it's not a good thing to do at this moment because prices, of course, are very low, and we're not going to get a good price for whatever we have to sell.
Thank you. I think this is a very fair argument. You mentioned when you were answering about the 5-year plan that like a lot of assumptions are no more valid. So do you anticipate a scenario where all the work which was done before you joined as the minister in the Prime Minister Department recently has to be like restructured? Are you going to revisit the whole plan, or somehow this the recovery plan, which earlier you mentioned also the role of Economic Action Council, is going to take more priority over the 5-year plan? How the dynamics would be?
Well, firstly, a lot of work has been done. As I said, when I came here, it was almost a done deal. One very important point is that the 12th Malaysia Plan and the 13th Malaysia Plan, which covers the period 2021 to 2030, this is the period when we want to implement the shared prosperity vision. This vision was launched in October last year by the previous Prime Minister, but the current Prime Minister has, for very good reason, has decided to embrace this philosophy of shared prosperity, and this is going to be the main agenda going forward in the next 10 years. We want to decent living, want to share prosperity with everyone. That's our objective. So that remains intact. That remains our policy. But when it comes to strategies, this is where there's got to be some radical changes. For example, many SMEs have been badly affected. Yeah, those SMEs which are not on the digital platform, not too much on e-commerce, has found this to be a very difficult period for them. Yeah, tourism is going to be a very difficult sector to revive because tourism behavior has changed quite a lot and will change quite a lot in the next few months. We'll be meeting people from the private education industry, for example. It will take a while before foreign students, because there have been a good number of foreign students coming to this country for further studies, and that will be affected as well. Investments, with the changes in the global value chain, in the last challenges in the global value chain in the last few weeks. Yeah. So there might be some changes in the investment promotion strategy. So, this is a new normal, as we know, and people are quite accustomed to video conferencing, social distancing, So perhaps in the future, there's going to be less need for physical offices. There'll be more virtual offices, and that will have an impact on property. And as we speak, this is a big issue in Malaysia. The property market is having lots of problems in the last. It's not new. It's been there for the last 1 or 2 years. So these are some. There are many others. Changes in economic behavior, changes in consumer behavior. Having said all that, I think it's an opportunity for reform. The shared prosperity vision will continue to be the main agenda for us in the next 10 years to achieve developed nation status by the year 2030. But when it comes to strategies, how to achieve this vision of shared prosperity, this is where there will be an opportunity for reform. We've been told that when we meet industry leaders, why don't you look at some licensing arrangements? There are many licenses you got to, there are many authorities you got to go to before some businesses are approved. One's got to look at those things. So this is, in a way, God sent. Yeah? Of course, we're going through a lot of challenges, but it gives us an opportunity to have a fundamental look at how we've been doing things in the past. Digital government, yeah. For example, we have to speed up. Well, we've done quite well in digital government, but we've got to look a lot more into that. Yeah? Digital commerce is going to be dominant. Cashless society e-wallets, for example. Yeah, when we are dispersing aid to the poor B40 and M40, I mean, people have got to queue up. Yeah, long queues in some parts of the country. They've got to call the police to control the crowd, and this has got to do with the fact that many people still need cash because we're not a cashless society yet. We are far behind compared to China. So these are some fundamental issues that we've got to deal with, and this is an opportunity when it comes to medium to long-term reform, which is what the 12th Malaysia Plan and the 10th, the next one, the 13th Malaysia Plan is all about. This is an opportunity to have a hard look at how we've been doing things, how we can simplify processes, how we can reduce bureaucracy and red tape, and inshallah, we hope to be able to come out stronger out of this challenge.
Right. Thank you so much. I will now refer to many of the questions, Datuk Seri, which have been asked in our chat box, question and answers box, and there are too many, so we will not be taking, obviously, all the questions, but I'll use maybe next about 20 minutes or so in referring to these questions. You have answered actually many of these issues already in your very comprehensive responses. But I think I will maybe emphasize on a couple of points to begin with. So going back to the post-MCO recovery discussion where we started, I think most of the questions are coming from that concern, like economic recovery, when it will happen and how it will happen, Malaysia growth rate. There have been questions on the also women role in the economy and how, if the government is paying any special attention to women at SMEs. But I think one key concern which I'm seeing in the questions is that MCO lifting, when it comes, because we recently saw it extended. And you already said that health ministry is playing the key role, so that is understood. But still you're part of the decision making, you're heading the Economic Action Council. So I believe that that is your mandate to sort of lead the economic recovery. Can I ask, based on these questions, like what are the factors or like trigger points which government has considered that, okay, if these factors are achieved, then we'll be going back to a new normal, normal economic activity. Can you elaborate on those factors?
Firstly, I'm in no position to answer this precisely. Firstly, I'm not the Minister of Health, and I'm no expert in health matters either. As a guiding principle, once again, I want to emphasize that health remains a very important issue for the government and the people of Malaysia. I'm very conscious of the health. I mean, this crisis taught us how important it is for all of us to be healthy and to have a good health infrastructure. And they've done a wonderful job. I mean, our doctors and nurses throughout the country, they're wonderful the job they've done in the last few weeks. So the indicators will be, I mean, for example, if there are a lesser number of new cases tested positive, lesser number of deaths, for example, I mean, the government's going to be guided once again by the Ministry of Health. But of course, it's got to do with how successful we've been in controlling this pandemic before we do further opening up. This is a general reply, I'm afraid. I'm sure some of you are not happy with that, but that's as far as I can venture in terms of responding to your question. I mean, of course, it is jobs are important, employment is important, micro enterprises, large companies are important, but the number one issue is health once again. So the opening up, the gradual opening up will be contingent upon, are we going to be advised by the Ministry of Health? The Ministry of Health will continue to play a very important role in this process of gradual opening up. I can say that much.
Yes, no, I totally agree that is perhaps not your primary mandate here. So, but since I was trying to sort of represent the most of the questions, so that I thought of conveying that to you. The other set of questions which have been raised is actually like not in Malaysia, but like cross-border, ASEAN, global value chain, the role of the trade. I mean, Malaysia historically, open economy, dependent on the trade historically. But I would say there are two parts of this question. So one part is like, what are the immediate concerns as far as the breaking down of these international supply chains is concerned? So any thoughts on that? And secondly, your general view, this is your own sort of intellectual view on the future of the free trade in the world, where these international supply chains seems to have been broken down or suspended, and many countries were already, even before COVID, were leading to more economic nationalism, if I could say that. So policy and then your own view.
Firstly, as you know, the WTO has come up with a statement that trade will contract about a third this year, which is a huge drop in trade. 1/3 is huge for a trading nation like Malaysia. Of course, we don't think ours will be dropped by 30%, but it's going to be a fairly big number. There'll be a drop for sure, and it's going to be a big number, not as much 30%, perhaps in the case of Malaysia. That's got to do with lack of demand. In the case of oil, for example, people are not flying, people are not using cars, and demand has slumped. Now they got to pay people to store oil in some parts of the world, and oil is stored in vessels instead of normal places in tanks. So this is a very difficult situation, and some products cannot be sold. This issue of a global value chain. I mean, Malaysia is very much part of this global. One of the biggest trading nations in the world in terms of percentage GDP, 160, 70%, 160% export and imports compared to our GDP. So we are, in terms of trade, we are very trade dependent. So Malaysia is going to be affected. And the fact is Malaysia has been very much part of the global value chain. And when this chain is broken, therefore we are not in a position to supply the products. And mind you, we also depend on imported products. Some of the things that we do in Malaysia depends on components coming from China, for example. I mean, it's not only Malaysia exporting to China, it's also Malaysia importing from China to produce some of the products in this country. So the impact is huge, and that's why this gradual opening of some sectors, hopefully will alleviate will prevent an even steeper decline. That's why I know that our colleagues in MITI are working very hard to see what else can be done, in order to open the Malaysian economy, subject to strict health protocol. Some small, medium enterprises are anxious to start work because SMEs are the backbone of any economy, and some of them are part of the value chain. Some SMEs, some Malaysian SMEs are globally competitive, and we have many people in Malaysia in the informal sector. We have a workforce of about 15 million, and at least 5 million are in the formal sector. These are people who are, some of them are daily rated, some of them have got no EPF, some of them have got no SOXO. So these are people who have been adversely affected. So trade, yes, will be affected. In terms of recovery, well, IMF has come up with a figure of 9% next year. Some people say that's too optimistic. Putting that aside, well, there will be recovery certainly next year. So the whole this year is going to be very challenging. Hopefully next year, Q1, Q2 next year, things will look better. Trade as well. The other issue was, the issue you raised was this whole free issue of free trade agreements, free trade. Yes, indeed, people are becoming more nationalistic. The country comes first for us as well, of course. Malaysia comes first in terms of purchases. Of course, more and more countries become inward-looking. The WTO has been going through a lot of challenges in the last couple of years. Some countries have become more inward-looking. Some countries are abandoning principles they espouse, as espoused by the WTO. This is, to me, being a former trade minister, of course, it is quite damaging to the international trading system. So we have quite a few trade agreements. In the region, we have the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. Of course, we've got TPP at broader level. So there'll be, hopefully, there will not be a stop to this free trade principle. If we close our borders, that will worsen the condition. The beggar thy neighbor policy of 1930s have caused a lot of damage to the world trading system in the 1930s. So hopefully this will not happen. And in ASEAN, there's been some undertaking that we try to make sure that the flow of goods is not disrupted. And I think by and large, within this region, ASEAN region in particular, we don't see that yet. But going forward, we have to do a lot of dialogues and discussion to discuss the future of the global trading system. We have to remain open. Of course, our country is very important, Malaysia, but at the same time, we have to have a hard look at where we should go. This is a very challenging period. Hopefully, this will not result in the closing of borders. This will not result in import-export bans. And if it's done for a few weeks or a few months, hopefully that this will be lifted as soon as possible.
Yes, I think I totally agree with you. As you can imagine that we also believe, as you said, that keeping the trade open is a part of solution, not part of the problem. There's one particular remark I'm just referring to again, one of the question, going back to the stimulus package, which you have identified. The question is that, I'm almost reading from it, isn't the term stimulus measures is a misnomer in the sense that it is almost impossible to stimulate an economy in lockdown, where the majority of businesses are closed and most are not allowed to work or to be productive. And so the effectiveness of stimulus while we are in the lockdown.
Well,
any thoughts on
that? Yes and no. Firstly, if those measures were not put in place, we would end up in a very difficult situation. There'd be 40, for example, without the help under the Bantuan Prihatin. The micro enterprises without the help announced by the Minister of Finance, for example, without those kind of help. The wage subsidy, which is already in place now by SOCSO, the reduction in employee contribution from 11 to 7, for example, which some employees have decided to apply. So without those measures taken by the government through the stimulus packages, we'll be in worse shape. Well, the other part of it is that it's true when we have a lockdown, but ours is a partial lockdown. Yeah, there's been a gradual opening. It's not a total lockdown. I think probably now about 1 million workers working in various companies have been approved by MITI. Yeah, I mean the previous there have been 2 phases of opening. I think altogether probably 1 million people. I mean, not all of them probably are on the job at the same time, but in total, probably about 1 million jobs have been, well, it was frozen before that. The companies were closed completely, now they open. So, well, hopefully when these companies operate, yeah, and that will stimulate businesses, including small, medium enterprises, that will result in some revival of the Malaysian economy. Of course, in the beginning, I mean, when the packages were first launched, we were in a different situation. We started with, I mean, not a single company was allowed to operate. Yeah? But when the gradual loosening up was implemented, some people are back to work, and hopefully some SMEs will be able to do some business. Therefore, the stimulus package actually has helped. Probably not in the very beginning, but as the packages have been implemented, I'm sure that has had some impact in terms of stimulating. I mean, this issue stimulus. So it is. It has been a stimulus. Without the 2-3 packages, the economy will be in worse shape. And going forward, I think next few weeks, as MITI considers probably more companies, there'll be more people going back to work, including SMEs, that will further lighten the burden of Malaysian workers in particular.
It's indeed good to know that the measures which the government has announced, as you said, partial lockdown are working. But as a follow-up, I'm wondering if the information coming from the private sector in terms of utilization of these stimulus packages. So you provided a number. You said that 1 million people are already back in the jobs, which is encouraging. But for instance, the loans utilization, can you provide us some sense of like how much it is being used currently?
Well, once again, I mean, some came directly from the government, some through bank system, some through EPF and SOCSO. EPF and SOCSO, I don't know the numbers, but it's been good. Yeah, our response has been great. The wage subsidy, for example, has done extremely well, and some people are appealing for further liberalization of this particular incentive by the government. And loans as well, the toko and the micro enterprises, I don't know the exact numbers, but response has been great. Of course, we have the normal complaints that some banks are making things difficult, which is quite normal in a way. But overall, I mean, there's been some surveys. The Department of Statistics have done some surveys. SME Corp has done some surveys. Some people are getting 3 kinds of assistance. So when it comes to government, of course, quite a lot of that has been disbursed. So that's the government part. When it comes to EPM SOCSO, the response has been good, and the banking system as well. So overall, I think from the feedback we get, I mean, as I said, a few organizations have done surveys, and they have shared the outcome of the surveys with the government. People are happy that things are moving. The issue now is that some are saying, how come I'm not covered? For example, we have a category called mid-tier companies. These are average-sized companies. We're helping the micro-enterprises, small SMEs quite a bit, but they say we're not being helped at all, some of them. And we have seen some professional service providers, the architects, engineers, and surveyors. I saw them yesterday, for example. They say that they've not been able to access some of the help given by it. So, I mean, most people in Malaysia are very happy. Yeah, the B40 and 40. Most businesses are happy, but yeah, of course, there's some segments of business who are telling us that the packages are not helping us much. Yeah, and that's coming mainly from what we call mid-tier companies. These are mid-sized companies, large corporations as well. Because large corporations, we believe that they're in a better position to weather the storm. The micro enterprises are the worst affected, and the people with low incomes, the B40, are the worst affected. And the focus of government help has been on B40 and micro enterprises. Having said that, of course, in actual fact, I think when it comes to, for example, moratorium on loans, if you have housing loan, I mean, it's across the board. It's not just meant for B40. So every Malaysian, I think, has been able to access the incentives provided in the 3 packages.
Great. On the stimulus package, I have seen some more questions, and one of the question is, so we have seen 3 packages. Do you anticipate another package, a 4th package, or do you think that that's enough?
Well, that's not for me to say. What I can say is that we will monitor developments very closely, which we've been doing. We've been listening to feedback on a daily basis. We see people every day. The Minister of Finance has seen lots of people. The Prime Minister, of course, they write to him to see him. Some people have come here, and we have been listening. And let me say this. The 3rd package on the 6th of April, announced by the Prime Minister, that was a result of the lots of appeals we received from SMEs in particular. That's why the last package, the 6th April package, focus a lot on small medium enterprises. That has got to do with the fact that we got, I mean, they came to show us through emails and video conferencing and some of them face-to-face meetings. They shared with us some of the challenges, and within a short period of time, 27th of March and 6th of April, a gap of only about 10 days, the government responded very fast. And that quick response was because the government listened to the problems being faced by small business enterprises. So that's my indirect answer to your question.
Thank you. That's very helpful. One related question.
Yeah. Okay. You got one more?
Sorry. One related question is that since they are like, I think about 5 minutes more. We'll take 5 minutes more
That's fine,
and then we'll conclude the webinar.
Okay.
So one related question on the stimulus was again, since they're coming from different agencies, including BNM, has government set up a kind of a central dashboard or a control room where